Hello and welcome to Code Tutorials. In this video, we'll be exploring how you can display the different stages in a process, or display your progress step by step. To help us with this, we have the process block from the Key Blocks for Gutenberg plugin. Right now, we're looking at a page with several examples of this block's use. As you can see, the process showcase can be colorful, the steps can be numbered, and you can add titles, text, icons, and so on. You can also pick between displaying your process horizontally or vertically, and the line connecting the different steps or stages can also be customized. There are numerous different aspects of the process that you can customize and style, and we have user-friendly options for all of them. You don't have to be particularly tech-savvy to make the most of them. And during the course of this video, we'll take a look at all those options in the process block that we need to create a version of it on our own site. To help me show off all the relevant options, I'll be making a copy of one of the examples from this page from scratch. So, let's get started. Head over to the back end. You'll need a page to work in. I created a new one. Now I just need to add the process block to it. Blocks can be added to the page in several ways. For one, you can click here on this blue button. It opens the block selection where you can look for the block you want. You can scroll through the blocks here to see everything you have on your site, from Gutenberg to key blocks and anything else you may have installed. Gutenberg blocks are black, whereas key blocks have red icons to set themselves apart. So, when you find your block here, you just need to drag and drop it into whatever location you want on the page. However, there is another way to add blocks. I'll close this. And the other way we can add blocks is by clicking on this plus sign button within the page. This opens a pop-up window with a view of all our recently used blocks and the search bar above that. So now I'm going to look for the block I want by typing in its name. You don't even have to finish, it starts filtering the blocks immediately. And there's the one I want. Simply clicking on it will automatically add it to the page. Okay, this is what the process block looks like by default. The styling is minimal and there are 3 stages or items shown in the process. To add more stages, go to the Items section in the options and click on the Add Item button. And there, we have 4 of them now. I plan to keep this number of items for my design. Granted, this doesn't look that great at the moment, but I'm going to adjust it shortly. Still, let's start exploring the options from the top. The first one we have is Item Layout. It allows us to pick if the process will be displayed horizontally, as it is right now, or vertically. If you want to use the vertical layout, you'll need to adjust the number of columns option. It determines how many items or stages will be shown across one line. So, to make the most of the vertical layout, you'll want to change the setting here to 1. And now we can see how the items fall one under the other. With the vertical layout, you can also keep the appear animation, which allows the items to appear one by one when visitors reach the section with the process block. Still, I don't plan on keeping this layout, so I'll switch the setting here to horizontal. And it looks like this because I have the number of columns still set to 1. I'll replace that with 4, so all my items can fit in the same line. There we go. Between the 2 options we just covered, we still have this toggle switch with Enable Appear Animation. It's active by default and it allows items, whether horizontal or vertical, to gradually fade into view. If that's not something you're interested in, you can simply disable the animation by toggling the switch off. Then nothing will happen. The items will simply be displayed on the page when someone reaches that section. But if you plan to keep it on, I'll switch it back on so we can actually see the effect. Then the stages of the process will appear one by one. I plan to keep this enabled for my finished result, but still I'm going to switch it off for now, as each change in the options will trigger the effect over and over again, and I don't want it to slow us down. Okay, the next option to look at is the columns responsive. The settings are predefined and custom, and in either case, the option determines how many columns will be shown on a range of different screen widths. You can leave it set to predefined if you don't want the hassle of making changes manually. The block is coded to be responsive, so you can be sure it will look good either way. The alternative is to pick the custom setting, where you can set a different number of columns for each range of screen widths. So, when I set 4 as the number of columns in the option above, I actually chose the number that will be shown on desktop screens. Now I can make adjustments for laptop, tablet, and mobile screens. To start with, the first range covers laptop screens. Here I'll set 4, and I'll do the same for the second one, which covers MacBook screens. Then for the next setting, which is the width of landscape orientation on tablets, I'll set 2, and 2 again for the portrait orientation on tablets. Okay. Finally, I'll set 1 for widths that cover the landscape orientation on mobile phones, as well as for widths that cover portrait orientation on mobile phones. Alright, that's that. Next, we have the items section. We can see my 4 items listed here, and if I click on an item, it opens to reveal additional options. The first of those is the icon field, where we can upload an icon that will replace the number in the circle which marks the first stage of the process. Let me show you. I'll add an icon from my media library. By the way, if you decide to use an icon, it needs to be in SVG format. I'll use this one and select. There we go. The icon has replaced the number, but the number hasn't vanished. It simply moved, so we can have the best of both worlds. After the icon, we have the title field. This is where we can replace the dummy text you see here. And then, using this field, we can replace the descriptive text that goes under the title. Keep in mind, all of this refers only to the first stage of the process as we're working with the options in item 1. I'll replace both the title and content text now, and speed up as I do so since I have a bit of typing ahead of me. Just a sec. Okay, there. Then after that, we have the item offset. This can let us move the item, meaning both the text and the icon together as a unit, either up or down. You can see how the item moves as I drag the slider. With this, you can make your items kind of zigzag a bit. I'm going to take advantage of this option and set 77 pixels for the offset. Okay, next we have the item holder size option. This allows us to change how large the circle holding the icon will be. When I start to move the slider, you can see how the circle expands and shrinks. And if you don't fancy setting this by hand, you can always type in a specific value. I'll put 218 pixels for this. There we go. After that, we have the item color option. We can use it to change the icon color, like so. You can set a new color using the slider or by inputting the appropriate hex code. However, I don't plan on changing the color here, so I'll simply reset the option. Okay. Next, we have the background type option. It allows us to pick the background for the icon, or what the circle that holds it will look like. With the classic background, the circle can have a solid color fill or an image as its background. The alternative to this is the gradient background type. Let's take a look at that one. I don't plan to use it, but it allows you to create a 2-color gradient blend for the background, which requires a few options to set up. So I'd like us to go through it together so you'd know what to expect. To start with, we have the first color, and you can set whatever you like. Then the same goes for the second color. Once you've set those, you can pick the gradient type. With the linear, the 2 colors will blend along a straight line, whereas with radial, the colors will blend in a more circular shape. Let me show you. I have the colors and type set. Now I'll adjust the location options. An important thing to keep in mind with these options is that their values need to be in ascending order. So the first location option needs to have a smaller value than the second one for the gradient blend to display properly. If you don't set that, then the colors won't blend. It will be a clear transition between the two. I'm going to use that as I show you the changes to the position option. They will be easier to see that way. So if I switch from center to center left, this is what the colors will look like. And we have all these other settings we can try, which will create different looks, such as top center or bottom center, and so on. You get the idea. And that's the look we get with the radial type. If we switch this back to linear, then instead of the position option, we'll have the angle option for setting where the colors will meet. So once you're happy with that, you can go back to the location options and fine-tune them. I'll adjust mine to get the gradient. There. And then you can see how much space you want each color to have, and in doing so modify the look of the gradient. Alright, that's one possibility for the background. The other, as I mentioned, is classic. That's the one I want. You can use it to set a background color or image. I'll set a color as that's part of my plan design. You can use the slider for this, but I have a specific shade in mind, so I'll set the hex code for it. Just a sec. Okay, there. Underneath this, we have the field for uploading an image, if you prefer that to using a color. Since I've already made my choice, I'll simply carry on. And the next option in line is the border type. By default, there's no border, but you can set one to show around the circle with the icon. Let me demonstrate. I'll set solid as the border type. Then I need to add a width for the border to show. 1 pixel will do. There. We now have a border framing this circle. Also, you can click on this chain icon here to connect all 4 border width fields into one. Then you can enter a single value that would apply to the entire circle at once. It's a lot quicker this way. Still, I'll disconnect the fields again because I want to show you something else. We have the border color option, which lets us change the color of the border we set. I'm using red just as an example, and if I go back to the border width option and increase just the left side, we can create this sort of crescent moon look for the circle. And another thing you can combine with this is the border radius. We have a default radius value. It serves to create the circle that holds the icon. Without the radius, that space will be square rather than circular. If I change the value for the top border radius by setting 30 pixels in this field, we can see that we have a corner here now. So a smaller radius value will create a more square look for the space, while a larger value will create a more circular look. Alright, let me clear this change to the radius. And before I undo all the other changes to the border, let's quickly go through the different types that are available, just so you know what each looks like. So, of the other border types we have, there is double, then we have grouped, and solid, which we've already seen, dashed, which looks like this, and dotted, that looks like this. Alright, I don't plan on using a border, so I'll clear the changes to the border width. That removed the border, but just in case, I'll switch the setting here to none. Okay, and reset the color setting too. After the border settings, we have the line top offset option. This lets us adjust the vertical position of the line connecting the items in the process, so we can move it up or down. I'm going to set mine to 35 pixels. Alright, and under that, we have the line rotation option. It lets us tilt the connecting line. The value you set here can be negative as well as positive. I'll put -8 for my line. And there we go. This is the look I want for the connection between my first 2 process stages. Since this was the last of the options we have within an item, we covered them all, I'm going to go through those for the other items and customize them. Given that you've seen the steps needed, I'll just skip ahead with the video to save you the time. And here we are. All my items have been customized and show the content I wanted them to have. So that brings us to the section under the items, Advanced. This section contains only one option, the additional CSS classes. You can use it to create a specific class for this element and then refer to that class when putting together CSS that would style your process block. However, there are plenty of existing style options that you can use, and we're going to take a look at them now. And we'll do that by opening the Style tab. The first option here lets us pick the text alignment. The default setting is center, but you can set it to be on the left, in the center, or on the right. I'll keep mine in the center. Then we have a set of sub-tabs with options for styling different aspects of the process block. We'll start with the first one in line, Title. Here we can pick which title tag we want to use. You can choose from any of these in the drop-down. I'll select H5. And this is what my titles look like now. After that, we can change the title color. Any change you make will be immediately visible on the page. As I'm happy to keep the default color, I'll reset the option. Okay, next we have the title typography settings. Typography settings come in a bundle, so when we open them, we can see several different options here. The first of these options allows us to change the font family for the title. There are hundreds of fonts for you to choose from. Then we can change the font size. It accepts values in pixels, ems, rems, and the viewport width. After that, we have the weight option. You can change the title font weight by picking any of the settings in this dropdown. There's also the transform option where we can change the title to, for example, uppercase or lowercase. And the style option can help us switch the title between normal, italic, or oblique. Then with the decoration option, we can add a line under, over, or through the title text. And finally, we have the line height and letter spacing options if we want to make any spacing adjustments to the text. And that's it for the typography options. Let me close this. The option we have after that is margin top. You can adjust it using the slider or by inputting a new value. I'll set something just to show you. With 30 pixels for my top margin, I now have less space above the titles. You can modify that space between the titles and the circles above them by changing the value you use. I'm happy with what I had by default, so I'll just reset the option. Okay, those were the options for styling the title. Let's see about the text now. In here, the first option is for changing the text color. You can see what it looks like if I set something new. Still, as I prefer using the default color, I'll reset the change. Okay. Following that, we have another set of typography options. If we look through them, we can see they are identical to the ones we saw for the title. Since we covered them already, there's no need to do so again. I'll just close this as I don't plan on making any changes to the text typography. Then after that, we have another margin top option. With this one, we can affect the space between the text and the title above it. I'll set 8 pixels to increase the gap a bit. Okay. Next, we have the padding option. There are 4 distinct fields for entering the padding. So, for example, I can set 10 pixels just for the top padding and leave the others blank. Now I have more space above my text, a bit as if I changed the margin top. I'll remove this in a minute, but first I want to show you that you can set completely different values for different sides of your text. I'll enter 5 pixels for the right side padding. You can see it shifted the text a bit. And for the bottom, actually I'll leave this blank. There's nothing under the text that I need to create distance from. But for the left side, I'll enter another 5 pixels. You can see this made the text a bit more compact. I think it looks nicer like this, except for the top side, too much of a gap there. I'll remove the padding and perfect. This is the look I was going for. That brings us to the end of the text style options, so we can move on to the ones for the item. The options here will allow us to adjust the look of the circles with the icons as well as the icons themselves. So the first option, item color, lets us change the color of the icons we set for the different process stages. We can see them showing the new color now. Still, I prefer keeping the default shade, so I'll reset the option. Then after that, we have the item typography setting, which we can use to affect the icon. Granted, most of the options here are not going to have much of an effect since we're working on an icon, not text, but we can still change things like the size. And that's what I'm going to do. And I'll set 50 pixels for this. There we go. Now the next few options are the same as what we got for the individual items. Item offset, item holder size, background type, and its subsets, background color and background image, are all options we already explored earlier. The main difference between the two sets of options is that the first one, the one within the Content tab, allows us to make settings that would affect each item separately. And we can see that on the page. I have used differently colored circles of different sizes in my process block. That wouldn't be possible if I had used the options here in the Style tab. The Style tab options don't differentiate. Any color I set would apply to all circles, same as it did for the icon when I changed it temporarily. This is great if you want a uniform look. You can get it with a couple of clicks rather than making adjustments for each item. Also, it's important to note that if you set these things within the Content tab, you won't be able to overrule them in the Style tab. Individual settings trump more general ones. All of this goes to say that the rest of the options for styling the item won't have an effect for me. And on top of that, we covered them already, so I'm going to skip them and move on to the next sub-tab. That one has options for styling the line. Here we can pick the line border style. That's the line connecting the circles for the different stages of the process. It can be solid, as we can see on the right. It can also be dashed, which looks like this, or dotted, which looks like this. I plan to stick with solid for my design, so I'll put it back. Okay, next we have the line border color. As you can see, it allows us to easily change the connecting line color. I'm going to set a light gray for this using a hex code. Just a sec. There. Then we have the line thickness, which can be used to make the line thinner or thicker depending on what you have in mind for your design. I'm going to set 1 pixel for that and make the line thinner. Okay, that's it for the line options. We can take a look at the last tab, numbers. With the options here, we can style the numbers marking the items or stages in the process. The first option allows us to change the color of the number in the circle. Let me show you. If I set something new, we can see here how the color changes. I like the default look, so I'll reset the option. After that, we have the typography settings for the number. I don't plan on changing anything here, but if you want to adjust something like the font size or style or anything else, the options are the same as the ones in the other typography bundles. Okay, I'll close this so we can carry on. The next option in line is the circle number holder size. When I move the slider, you can see how the circle holding the number changes its size. If you don't fancy setting it by hand, you can always type in a specific value. However, I'm going to keep the default size, so I'll reset the option. Following that, we have the circle number position option. Only 2 fields are active, so we can move the circle with the number from the top to the bottom and from the right to the left. Okay, I'll clear this. Next, there's the background type option. I don't plan on changing mine, but you should know it works the same as the background type option we saw for the larger circle, the one with the icon. So, once more, we have the choice between the classic and gradient setting. Since we know how both work, I won't go into detail again. I just want to show you what a change in the default background color might look like. You have this familiar color picker, and anything you choose will immediately show up on the left. I'll reset this. And under the color, we have a field for uploading an image, if you prefer that to using a single color for the background. And that's the last of the options for styling the number. If we go back up, we can see this was the last of the subtabs. Still, there is one more major tab here, Advanced. The options within it are something you get with every one of the key blocks for Gutenberg, and they serve to set how an individual block will look and act on the page. For example, there are responsiveness and motion effect settings here. While these options are undoubtedly useful as they can help you adjust the block positioning, background, border, and more, they affect blocks as a whole. They aren't specific to the process block, so we won't be covering them in this tutorial. That means we're just about done. I'll hit update to save my work. And this is what I wanted my process to look like. Still, there is one thing I said I'd do at the end, and that is to enable the appear animation again. So let's briefly open the Content tab and move the toggle to activate the animation. And there we are. This here is all I wanted for my element. I'll update again now that all the settings are in place. So this is one of the many possible design solutions for the process block. You can see other solutions on the page we started from. There are different looks and layouts you can create with this block, and it's up to you to decide which of them would best showcase the stages of a process on your site. With everything we covered in this video, you'll know how to recreate any of the examples shown here, or to create something entirely unique. This is the one I chose for this tutorial, but with knowledge of the options within the process block and how these options work, you should find it easy to break down any of these other examples. You can then recreate them on your site or use them as a starting point for your own building work. It's up to you. The important thing is that you've seen which options are involved in the making of a process element, as well as how to use them and make the most of them to create whatever design you have in mind. To conclude, we hope you found this video on the process block helpful and that you will soon be trying it out yourself. If you have any questions after watching this video, or comments or suggestions you'd like to make, please drop us a line in the comment section below. Also, make sure to subscribe to our channel and be the first to learn about any new tutorials and theme guides. Thank you for watching.